In 1994, a 30-year-old Wall Street executive walked away from a seven-figure bonus to sell books out of a garage in Seattle. His friends thought he had lost his mind. His parents invested their ass tight to their life savings and were warned they would probably lose every penny. 3 decades later, that garage operation is worth more than $2 trillion, employs over 1.5 million people, and touches roughly half of every dollar spent online in the United States. This is not just the story of a company, it is the blueprint of the most relentless growth machine in modern capitalism. Jeff Bezos did not build Amazon to sell books. He built Amazon to sell everything, to everyone, forever. And the strangest part is that he told the world exactly how he was going to do it, in plain English, in a single shareholder letter written in 1997. Almost nobody believed him. Today, the same companies that laughed are gone, swallowed, or scrambling to copy a playbook that was hiding in plain sight. To understand how a bookstore became an empire, we have to start with a number Bezos wrote on a napkin, a number that has guided every decision Amazon has made for nearly 30 years. The number was not revenue. It was not market share. It was not even profit. The number Bezos cared about was the flywheel. He sketched it during a meeting with executives, and the drawing has since become legendary inside Amazon. Lower prices bring more customers. More customers attract more sellers. More sellers expand selection. Larger selection improves the customer experience. Better experience brings even more customers, and the entire loop lowers cost structure, which feeds back into lower prices. Round and round it spins, each turn making the next turn easier. Most companies chase quarterly earnings. Bezos chased momentum. He understood something his competitors did not. In a world of compounding loops, the company that starts spinning first and refuses to stop will eventually crush every rival, not because it is smarter, but because it is heavier. The flywheel is why Amazon was willing to lose money for years. Wall Street analysts mocked Bezos as a reckless dreamer burning investor cash. He simply kept pointing at the diagram. Every dollar of profit, he argued, should be reinvested into making the wheel spin harder. Dividends were a confession of failure. Buybacks were surrender. Growth was the only acceptable outcome, and growth had to be permanent. To make the flywheel spin, Bezos needed something almost no executive in history has ever truly embraced. He needed patience. In his now famous 1997 letter to shareholders, he wrote that Amazon would make decisions based on long-term cash flow, not short-term margins. He warned investors that if they wanted quick returns, they should buy a different stock. Then he did something extraordinary. He printed that exact letter and attached it to every annual report for the next 25 years. It became a kind of contract, a public reminder that the rules had not changed and would not change. While rivals optimized for the next quarter, Amazon optimized for the next decade. When competitors celebrated record profits, Amazon deliberately suppressed its own. When the dot-com bubble burst in the year 2000, Amazon stock collapsed by more than 90%. Headlines declared the company dead. Bezos walked into an all-hands meeting, held up a newspaper headline calling Amazon a doomed dream, and told employees that the company was not the stock. The company was the customers, the warehouses, the code, the culture. As long as those kept improving, the stock would eventually catch up. It took 5 painful years, but it caught up, and then it kept climbing. By 2002, Amazon had survived the crash, but Bezos knew survival was not enough. He needed to weaponize the company against itself. So he issued one of the most consequential internal memos in tech history. From that day forward, every team inside Amazon would communicate with every other team through programmable interfaces, the same way an outside developer would. No shortcuts, no hallway conversations, no shared databases. If your team built a service, you had to expose it as if a stranger on the internet were going to use it. And here was the kicker. anyone who failed to comply would be fired. The memo was brutal, but the logic was surgical. By forcing every internal tool to behave like an external product, Bezos was secretly preparing Amazon to rent out its own infrastructure to the rest of the world. Years later, this discipline gave birth to Amazon Web Services, the cloud computing division that today powers Netflix, NASA, the Central Intelligence Agency, and a third of the entire internet. AWS was not invented in a lab. It was the accidental byproduct of a CEO who refused to let his own engineers take the easy path. The retail store was the visible empire. The plumbing underneath would become the invisible one. Before we go deeper into how Amazon turned that plumbing into the most profitable business in tech history, take 1 second to subscribe to Titan Codex. Every week, we break down the empires, the founders, and the hidden machines that quietly run the modern world. Hit that subscribe button so you never miss the next story. Amazon Web Services launched publicly in 2006, and almost no one understood what they were looking at. Reporters described it as a niche tool for hobbyist developers. Microsoft and Google barely paid attention. Inside Amazon, however, AWS was already eating the world. Startups discovered that instead of buying servers and hiring system administrators, they could rent computing power by the hour, scale up overnight, and shut down in the morning. A company like Airbnb or Pinterest could be born in a dorm room and reach millions of users without ever owning a single piece of hardware. Bezos had effectively turned electricity itself into a subscription. By the time the established tech giants realized what was happening, Amazon had a head start measured in years. Today, AWS generates more annual revenue than McDonald's, Coca-Cola, and Nike combined, and it produces the majority of Amazon's operating profits. Without it, the retail business, with its razor-thin margins and brutal logistics, would barely break even. AWS is the silent engine that funds everything else, from Prime Video to robot warehouses to rocket ships. The bookstore in the garage had quietly become the landlord of the internet, and the rent was being collected in dollars, euros, yen, and reais. While AWS was conquering the back end of the internet, another quiet revolution was unfolding in the front. In 2005, Amazon launched a program that on paper looked insane. For $79 a year, customers could get unlimited 2-day shipping on millions of items. Internal projections showed the company would lose money on almost every order. Executives begged Bezos to reconsider. He refused. He understood that Prime was not a shipping program. It was a psychological weapon. Once a customer paid the annual fee, every future purchase felt free. The brain stops comparing prices, stops checking competitors, stops hesitating at checkout. Buying from Amazon becomes a reflex, like flipping a light switch. Within a few years, Prime members were spending more than twice as much as non-members, and they almost never canceled. Bezos then began stuffing the membership with extras: streaming video, music, free ebooks, photo storage, grocery delivery. Each new perk made cancellation feel more painful, even if customers never used half of them. By 2024, Prime had over 200 million paying subscribers worldwide. It is, by some measures, the most successful loyalty program in the history of commerce, and it was built on a single insight: people do not buy products, they buy habits. Habits, however, only work if the product actually arrives. And here Amazon faced a problem no algorithm could solve. Physical goods have to move through real warehouses, on real trucks, driven by real people, across real cities choked with traffic. So Bezos did what he always does when a bottleneck appears. He bought the bottleneck. Amazon began constructing fulfillment centers at a pace that defied logic. Today, the company operates more than 1,100 warehouses globally, some of them larger than 20 football fields, packed with shelves that stretch for miles. Inside, an army of orange robots glides silently across the floor, lifting entire towers of inventory and delivering them to human pickers who scan, pack, and and ship. The choreography is so precise that an order placed in the morning can be on a doorstep before dinner. To control the last mile, Amazon built its own delivery network, leased its own cargo planes, branded its own trucks, and even experimented with drones. Every link in the chain that used to belong to FedEx, UPS, or the United States Postal Service is now slowly being absorbed. The flywheel demands speed, and speed demands ownership. Bezos understood that whoever controls the road controls the destination. Owning the road was not enough. Bezos also wanted to own the shelves, and not just his own. Enter the Amazon marketplace, perhaps the most underestimated weapon in the entire empire. Instead of competing with every small retailer on Earth, Amazon invited them in. Sellers could list their products on Amazon's website, use Amazon's warehouses, and reach Amazon's customers. In exchange, Amazon would take a cut of every sale, plus fees for storage, advertising, and fulfillment. The genius of the model is that it transferred all the risk to the seller. If a product flopped, the seller ate the loss. If it sold well, Amazon collected a tax on every transaction without ever touching the inventory. Today, more than 60% of all goods sold on Amazon come from third-party sellers. That means most of Amazon's retail empire is technically not Amazon at all. It is millions of independent merchants who have no choice but to play by the platform's rules, because the platform owns the customer. And when Amazon notices that a particular product is selling extraordinarily well, it sometimes does something controversial. It launches its own version, often cheaper, and quietly buries the original in search results. The host eats the guest. This brings us to the darker mechanics of the machine, the part Bezos rarely talks about in shareholder letters. Amazon is not just a retailer, it is a data empire. Every click, every search, every hover, every abandoned cart, every product return is captured, stored, and analyzed in real time. Amazon knows what you bought, what you almost bought, what your neighbors bought, and what you will probably want next Tuesday afternoon. This information is fed into recommendation engines, pricing algorithms, and advertising auctions that adjust millions of times per second. The result is a store that quietly reshapes itself for every individual visitor. Two customers searching for the same product can see different prices, different rankings, and different ads. The shelves rearrange in your honor, and you never notice. Regulators in Europe and the United States have begun investigating whether this level of control crosses legal lines, particularly when Amazon uses seller data to design its own competing products. Lawsuits are piling up. Fines have been issued. So far, none of it has slowed the machine. The fines are smaller than a single quarter of Prime Video losses. For Amazon, regulatory friction is just another cost of doing business at planetary scale. To understand why nothing seems to stop Amazon, you have to understand the culture Bezos engineered inside the company. It is famously, almost notoriously, intense. New hires are handed a list of 14 leadership principles and told to memorize them. Customer obsession comes first. Frugality is treated as a virtue. Meetings begin in silence because Bezos banned PowerPoint years ago and replaced it with 6-page written memos that everyone reads quietly for the first 20 minutes. He believed slides let bad ideas hide behind bullet points. Written prose forces clarity. Decisions are categorized into two types. Type 1 decisions are irreversible, like jumping out of an airplane, and must be made slowly and carefully. Type 2 decisions are reversible, like walking through a door, and must be made fast. Most executives, Bezos argued, treat every decision like type 1, which is why big companies become slow and timid. Amazon trains its leaders to sprint through type 2 doors and only pause for the cliffs. The result is a corporation that behaves less like a hierarchy and more like a swarm of small, aggressive teams, each one obsessed with its own metric, each one terrified of complacency, each one feeding the same flywheel that has been spinning since 1997. In 2021, Bezos stepped down as chief executive and handed the empire to Andy Jassy, the longtime head of AWS. Many observers expected the machine to slow. It did not. Amazon kept expanding into pharmacy, healthcare, satellite internet, artificial intelligence, live sports broadcasting, and grocery chains. The company acquired MGM Studios for nearly $9 billion, giving it a film library stretching back almost a century. It poured billions into training its own large language models to compete with OpenAI and Google. It launched a constellation of low-orbit satellites called Project Kuiper, aiming to beam broadband internet to every corner of the planet. Each new venture looks unrelated until you remember the flywheel. Pharmacy customers become Prime customers. Prime customers stream MGM movies. MGM viewership feeds advertising revenue. Advertising revenue funds AWS expansion. AWS hosts the AI models that power the recommendation engine that sells more pharmacy. The wheel does not just spin, it absorbs entire industries and bolts them onto its rim. Bezos may no longer sit in the chief executive chair, but the operating system he installed runs without him. The empire has become self-propelling, and that may be the most dangerous thing about it. Of course, no empire grows this fast without leaving scars. Amazon has been accused of grinding down workers in its warehouses, where productivity quotas are tracked by the second and bathroom breaks are sometimes treated as performance failures. Union drives have erupted in New York, Alabama, and across Europe. Investigative journalists have documented injury rates higher than the industry average. Small businesses have testified before Congress that selling on Amazon feels like renting a storefront from a landlord who can evict you at any moment and copy your inventory on the way out. Environmental groups point to the mountains of cardboard, the diesel fleets, the data centers drinking electricity by the gigawatt. Bezos and his successors respond with pledges, higher wages, climate commitments. Carbon-neutral shipping by 2040. Critics call the promises public relations. Supporters call them progress. The truth is probably somewhere in the middle, and the flywheel keeps turning regardless. Because here is the uncomfortable lesson of Amazon. A machine designed for infinite growth does not stop when it reaches enough. There is no enough. There is only the next quarter, the next category, the next country, the next loop around the wheel. There is one more dimension to the Amazon story that often gets overlooked, and it may be the most important of all. Bezos did not just build a company, he built a language. Inside Amazon, words like dive deep, disagree and commit, bias for action, and frugality are not slogans on a poster. They are weapons used in meetings, performance reviews, and promotion decisions. When a manager says a proposal lacks customer obsession, the conversation is over. When an engineer is told to write a press release before writing any code, it forces them to imagine the finished product from the customer's point of view before a single line is typed. This technique, called working backwards, has been copied by Microsoft, Meta, and dozens of startups. But at Amazon, it is sacred scripture. Bezos understood that culture is software for humans. Install the right operating system, and the people inside will make the right decisions automatically, even when the founder is not in the room. That is why Amazon kept growing the moment he stepped aside. The code was already running. Andy Jassy did not need to reinvent the company. He only needed to keep the cursor blinking, keep the memos flowing, keep the flywheel from ever stopping. And then there is the question almost no one asks out loud. What happens when a single private organization controls the warehouses, the delivery trucks, the cloud servers, the streaming pipes, the smart speakers, the satellite internet, the pharmacy, and the grocery store? At what point does a company stop being a company and start being infrastructure, the way roads and electricity are infrastructure? Bezos has always insisted that Amazon is still small, still fragile, still still one bad decision away from collapse. Day 2, he calls failure. Day 1 is paranoia, hunger, beginner's mindset. Every employee is told that Amazon must remain in day 1 forever because day 2 means stasis, irrelevance, and slow death. Critics argue that this is convenient mythology, a story powerful companies tell themselves to justify never being satisfied. But there is something undeniably real about the discipline behind it. Most empires die from comfort. Bezos engineered a culture in which comfort is the enemy. Whether you admire him or fear what he built, the result is the same. Somewhere in Seattle, a screen is glowing with a metric nobody outside the building has ever seen. An executive is reading a 6-page memo in absolute silence, and a robot the size of a dog is sliding under a tower of inventory, lifting it gently and beginning to move. So what did Jeff Bezos actually build? On the surface, he built a store. Look closer, and he built a logistics network, a cloud platform, an advertising business, a film studio, a hardware company, for a robotics lab, a satellite operator, and a grocery chain. Look closer still, and you realize he built none of those things in isolation. He built a single organism, a system in which every part feeds every other part, and every part gets stronger the more the system is used. Economists call this a network effect. Bezos calls it a flywheel. Historians may eventually call it the defining business model of the 21st century. The lesson is not that Amazon is unbeatable. Empires fall. Rome fell. Standard Oil fell. IBM was once invincible. The lesson is that Bezos understood earlier and more clearly than anyone else that in a digital economy, scale is not a side effect of success. Scale is the strategy. Whoever spins the wheel first, hardest, and longest wins. And whoever hesitates, no matter how clever, eventually becomes inventory on someone else's shelf. The garage in Seattle is long gone. The machine it launched is just getting started. And if you found this story fascinating, you will love our deep dive on the rise and fall of another founder who tried to build an empire on a completely different philosophy. The link to that video is on screen right now. Click it and let us keep exploring how the modern world really gets built.